What is up, everybody? It is Tuesday, September 6th, 2022. This begins, last week we started, but this is going into my fourth season of podcasting football coverage, and so anybody remembers I used to do my show on Tuesdays. We call it the Tuesday Aftermath. So shout out to the ex Tuesday Aftermath and my old pal Max. Spent some time with him this weekend. He still is fun and crazy and loves football as much as ever. But I've got a if not an equal, a better guest, a better partner with me tonight. I've got Mo Murphy from Up in Flames, my partner at Off the Ball Network. Mo, how are you tonight?
What's going on, bro? I mean, it's easy to clear up the schedule to talk college football with you. Like, this is awesome. We went the whole summer, did no shows together, really didn't do anything. So it's easy. Like, I'm here every week if I need to be. Like, this is just easy stuff.
Happy to hear it, man. I couldn't be happier. So, like Mo said, this is our college football reaction, our wrap up. We're not going to break down every game, every play, every minute. We're not going to focus on just the big games. We kind of take it from how we see it as college football fans. You know, what stories were important to us. It's a personal show, but I think we get a better show that way. So again, check out offtheballnetwork.com for a ton of great content going on over there. A lot of football shows ramping up. NFL starts this week. Things are going to go bananas. I can't say enough again. Go check out why everybody took the summer off, us football guys, and we were out playing disc golf and camping and drinking beers. Couch Coach Live absolutely destroyed it. He had a great summer. He was the hardest working man in podcasting. So anybody that's listening, go watch his stuff, go listen to his stuff at Couch Coach Live. And of course, please, we're just asking, do us a favor, subscribe to Off the Ball Network's YouTube channel. All this stuff is on there. Again, we have a bunch of stuff coming up. Means a ton to us. If you can just hit that subscribe button, we really appreciate it. But without further ado, Mo, let's talk some college football. So I don't even know how to start this. Do you want to just have the Ohio State discussion, then we can move on? Is that how we want to do this?
That's fine. Yeah, we can knock that out real quick because we're going to either start it or we're going to get into it somehow, some way. So
okay, here we go. So Mo's a huge Ohio State fan. I'm a huge Ohio State fan. Again, I do the Buckeye remix every week, if you know me. So me and Mo's just going to take 5 minutes here. And it's not like it's ill-advised. We're not. Maybe next week we won't do this. Hopefully, for Arkansas State.
Probably not.
But it was the biggest. It was. I mean, I said it last week. Biggest game I said in the history of the shoe in my lifetime, outside of a Michigan game or most Big Ten games. I think it lived up to the billing. The first thing I'm going to tell you, Mo Murphy, my biggest knee-jerk reaction was. And I'm hard on them all the time, and I'm always negative on our home field advantage here in Columbus. The crowd showed up towards the end of the first when Notre Dame took the lead. Our offense was stalling. There was one moment where all I could hear was Notre Dame chants, and I got really upset. I might have thrown a beer can. I might have lost my shit a little, but all in all, the second half, the crowd was there. They were in scarlet. They were yelling. They were screaming. It was very positive vibes. It felt like they were aware of the situation. It felt like they were confident, which I thought that's what I felt from the crowd. So I just want to first and foremost shout out to the Ohio State home crowd. You guys did a great job over the weekend. I doubted you. I'm here to apologize. I was wrong. So Mo, knee-jerk reaction to Ohio State game. Give it to me.
Well, just speaking to the crowd real quick. Ohio State planned for this all summer, and I'm going to tell you why. They put all these 5-star and 4-star recruits on the same field, on the same sideline as LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Ezekiel Elliott, Justin Fields, and the whole most of the 2002 national championship team and everybody else in history that you could put on that sideline. We put all those 5 stars and 4 stars. So Ohio State was planning for this all summer from a recruiting perspective. I mean, they got LeBron. They called LeBron personally. I think LeBron was in this game, but they called LeBron personally. They knew this was going to be the game. They were going to have the most recruits, show the most love. So from a crowd perspective, I think that's going to win us over some recruits. They've all had positive things to say. So that's going to be something to look at. And some of those guys that were there that have Ohio State in their Final Five, they've been crystal ball to Ohio State. Yeah. So there's a lot of people that think that had a huge influence. I mean, you put a 17-year-old kid around LeBron James, and Jason Tatum. I'm sorry, but if you'd have had Michael Jordan on the sideline to these 17-year-old kids, wouldn't have been that big a deal. But LeBron is the the god of athletes for these 17-year-old kids. So that was a great recruiting pitch. But the game, I couldn't have asked for a better result. I didn't want to go out there and score 42 and give up 35. I didn't, as exciting of a game that would have been, in an instant classic, and would have been on ESPN the next day because it was must see. It would have been the same Ohio State team as last year. And we were hoping that, the addition of Jim Knowles, which I want to point out, it's not a coincidence that Ohio State's defense holds Notre Dame to 10 points and Oklahoma State gives up 44 points to Central Michigan because Jim Knowles leaves. So
you're not I noticed that.
Whatever he is defensively, he lived up to it, because I'm sorry, that just doesn't happen in the same week. And you tell me it has nothing to do with each other.
And I was wrong on Stewart's show. I said that I didn't care about coaches leaving for the first year, and I was totally wrong. Jim Knowles' vacancy had a huge effect on who I have a possible playoff contender in Oklahoma State, which I got to go back and think. So that I'll just update that. I'm not doing my playoff rankings this week. I don't see the sense in updating them this week because of all the lopsided games and stuff. So just if anybody's wondering, it's probably going to be every 2 weeks. And then when we get into the heart of the season, I'll really start looking at it. But I'm not going to sit here and nitpick. We know Utah's dropped down. We know Notre Dame's dropped down. Things like that. Oklahoma State's going to drop down, but I'm not doing them this week. So next week I'll update the standings after we've got to see a couple more games. We'll get to see Alabama play a team that's in going to be in their conference. So another first question about the game. We talk about the defense. Ohio State's defense. I'll tell you what I liked is that they did stuff. And I know that sounds so simple, but you can add, like all the experts have said today on all the shows, the podcast or whatever, they're like, that's the first time Ohio State's basically did much more than a base defense, a base cover 2 or something in a long time. The second half of that game, they completely strangled Notre Dame. And I keep saying that because I'm this guy. Do I believe that Notre Dame is the 5th best team in the country? And I'll ask you a question pertaining to that here in a second. No, I do not. But they were ranked that way going into it. So I have to look at it from that standpoint. All I know is the second half of that game, they had no chance to score. They didn't want to be on the field. They were just trying to get out of there without giving up more points. They played it safe, all the above. And when I saw like Ohio State's defensive line going into these odd fronts and shifting, and you got Harrison dropping into coverage, and then we're actually getting sacks out of a middle linebacker. Eichenberg had 2 sacks. This is stuff that I haven't seen in years. And I know it hasn't been that long. We won a national championship like 8 years ago. We're spoiled, but still, like, that was my most gratifying thing, was just to see the movement on defense. And it felt like Ryan Day for the first time had his focus on one side of the ball and actually trusted the other side of the ball. It felt like I've always felt in the years past that he was too torn. He was too worried about, like, I got to go score. I got to go score. And it actually, I said today on the remix, when you have a bad defense and you play these games, like, it actually narrows your offensive playbook. It doesn't open it up. Like, everybody thinks Ohio State's playbook's wide open when they're scoring 70. I don't think it's that case. I think in games like this, when you're not as concerned the other team scoring every 5 seconds, I think that's when you open up your playbook. Because guess what we did? We ran a ball down their throat and scored a touchdown. It took 7 minutes. I don't care. It was a great 7 minutes. It was a great drive, and it ended the game. So, like, that opens your playbook. But thinking if you fumble the ball, the other team's going to score in 30 seconds, that narrows it down. So I just felt Ryan Day was comfortable and trusted his defense. I was and if anybody knows me, I'm going to say straight up, I was pleased with the outcome. I was furious during it. I was throwing stuff. I was cussing. I was giving it the whole business. I apologize. It was a good, solid victory. And anytime I can beat Notre Dame, like, I just want to be clear how much I dislike that team.
Yeah.
So that felt good too.
Yeah. And then just, before we move on, like, to me, the biggest thing that, if you're an Ohio State fan, you'll understand, but anywhere else, like, it's probably not that big a deal. Josh Proctor got benched that game. Like, and nobody's really, nobody's talking about it because it's probably, I don't think he's benched for the season. I don't think it's permanent. He is coming off an injury, but I know they were asked about it, and, like, he made 2 mistakes, and Jim Knowles kind of was like, I've seen enough. So for me, it's like, okay, He's making everybody accountable, regardless of the status that you have in the program on that side of the ball, because we know how much it hurt losing him last year. So he has high value on that defense. But two, it goes to show, like, if you don't trust who's backing him up, you don't make that decision. You just constantly dig into him and tell him to be better. But you think that you're deep enough that you could put your backup safety in there and think that he was going to make some noise. So those were the two things where I'm like, okay, he's going to hold everybody accountable, but he said he's got 6 different pass rushers and all of them are going to play. We're going to rotate them. So everything that we've heard all offseason came into fruition outside of the expectation of the offense. But like everybody who's covered this game Monday and Tuesday and given their reaction, nobody's holding Ohio State to 21 again. Like, it's not going to happen for the rest of the year. So,
and if we give up 10, I don't care. Like, that's my whole point.
21-10 every game, except like Arkansas State and Toledo, like we need
understood.
But the games, like if we beat Wisconsin 21-10, and we beat Michigan 21-10, and we come out of East Lansing with 21-10, like I'm fine with that because that means our defense is playing great, and we know our offense is a volcano waiting to explode. So I'm good with the way we won. Only thing I hate is I just wish I could have seen some more meaningful touchdowns. And like we said, because we play Arkansas State and Toledo. And so those are 2 games that you sit back, you watch, you casually have a cup or 2, but it's nothing to get all hyped for. Like, that's not a game that's, Ohio State's going to handle business. I'm not worried about us struggling. I'm not worried about JSN playing or not. Like, we have plenty of weapons. You've seen Emeka Egbuka step up. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm just concerned about, all right, now we need to put up a lot of points on bad teams and get it over with and get ready for Wisconsin. And so I hate those 2 tune-up games back to back. I really do.
Yeah, we talked about that. I would rather have it flipped and play the big game the second week. That's for any team. Just like you brought up the Alabama-Texas game. That's awesome that's next week. But then again, it's just how it's got to be scheduling-wise. My takeaway, and we'll move on here. They knew what Notre Dame was going to try to do coming into the game, and they beat them at their own game. They beat them in every category. They didn't get sucker punched. What I didn't want to see was them come in and get ran over again and then have to say, what did you do all summer? Like I knew what Freeman's game plan was going to be. How did you not? But that's not what happened. I thought CJ made a concentrated effort to not risk the ball. I know there's a discussion about his stats. I don't care. I think he played a winning football game. I still think he's a kid that, like I said again on the remix, he's got some growing to do. He's not perfect yet, but no interceptions, no fumbles. He made huge, 3rd down conversions. And when Notre Dame took a couple risks, he punished him twice for 2 touchdowns. I don't know what more you want. I think if JSN doesn't go out, I think they score another touchdown, which now you're telling me we got an 18-point victory, we're having a whole different conversation. I do think that, but I also think that it was it'll be, as long as he's healthy, it'll be good in the long run that they had to deal with adversity right off the bat to a good defense.
I think they held their game because Ryan Day, when it comes to RT, I pay attention to things a lot more. And so Ryan Day, like admitting that losing JSN rattled us, goes to show me that we were going to rely on running the ball, big plays from Smith and Najigba, and keep it moving. But you said it best on Buckeye Remix, and we talked about it pregame, but you said it best. Notre Dame played not to get blown out. Ohio State played to get the win and get out of there.
Yep.
Like they played to win, beat the number 5 team, and live, because that's going to look good on your record. And they still value the way Notre Dame played because they only dropped them to 8. So it's not like they're like, oh, Notre Dame was just this horrible team. It wasn't the Oregon situation. So I don't think they're the 5th best team or whatever, but there still was a little value in, like, it was a quality win for Ohio State. And I know everybody has a problem with them dropping to 3. Part of me thinks Ohio State should have been number 3 starting the season anyway. I don't think we should have been.
I agree. We talked about the rankings. I think they actually kind of corrected the rankings this week. We said it on our show. I hate preseason rankings.
Yeah, the reigning champ, like, we shouldn't have been disrespecting them. And then you seen like and I'm not saying being put at 3 is the ultimate disrespect, right? But you're the reigning champ. You did lose a lot of talent. It's all replaced. You got some transfers in. You still have the same quarterback. And so for like Ohio State lost a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You lost 2 of your 3 best receivers, things like that. But because you still had CJ Stroud, JSN and company, and you we bring in Knowles. We got credit for that. Bringing in Knowles, don't even know what the defense was going to look like.
Yeah.
The expectation was Ohio State's going to have a better defense than last year, so they're not going to be the same team. They're number 2. They're clear-cut number 2. And then Georgia goes out and handles business. I think it was partially Oregon was overrated. They had Bo Nix at quarterback. Let's just be honest. But also, like, I think it was a statement game. Like, I do think Georgia being number 3 and not being number 1 gave them that extra juice. I'm going to be honest. I think they probably feel like they should be considered the best team in the country. They're the reigning champs, and they got the same coach, same quarterback, and some of the same weapons. And yes, they lost a lot, and they showed it. And those 3 tight ends, I've never seen 3 tight ends like that.
They were awesome. Georgia, yeah. We'll just move on to what we're talking about here. Georgia, they come in again, an arbitrary number 3. The preseason AP rankings mean nothing, but they are a number that they put up there. And Georgia, it was as dominant a victory over a quality opponent. That's all I'll say about Oregon right now, because I don't know how good they are, but I know that they're definitely a top 25 team throughout the season. And Georgia, I mean, they never blinked. They did whatever they wanted. Oregon was completely dumbfounded. It was never in question. Georgia, I said this, Georgia's a complete team. Like, Georgia's ready to play now. They would have beat anybody in the country. Them and Alabama would have fought on Saturday, because Georgia's just ready. They were completely ready. There was no question marks. Bennett played better than he did last year. That was an impressive victory by Georgia. Yeah, they just
like the guy, and he's the guy. You know, I always talk about it. Like, we talk about Stroud and Bryce Young, and I'm not saying Bennett's going to be the number 1 pick or anything, but, you know, when you talk about the draft, you always we hear about Rattler and Stroud and, you know, all these guys, right? And then we know, like, every guy, there's always somebody that we're not talking about that comes out of nowhere and has an amazing Heisman campaign type season. And because I think you wouldn't consider Stetson Bennett coming out of nowhere, but, like, mind you, this was the guy who got them to the national championship, and they still were talking about, like, he shouldn't start.
Yeah, who should play
national championship game? Like, they still were leaning with JT Daniels, right? So, like, they were still leaning that, like, if Daniels is come back and ready, healthy, they didn't believe in him. He won the national championship, and people still are like,
over a good Alabama defense.
Right. So I still think, like, everybody's like, okay, maybe that's the question mark with Georgia, is how good was Stetson Bennett? Well, if he didn't answer that question on Saturday, then you know, he could be that guy. Like, if he plays like that all year, who's to say it's not him, Stroud, Young, and said other player in New York, you know, at the end of the year. So I do think he played a great game. I mean, like, what did you? I don't know what the expectation was, but he played better than I thought.
I knew that they were. I did. There you go. I did not expect that out of their offense, and I'm not saying that I didn't think they would score, but I thought it would just be like they would just bowl over them, get out of there with a 30-0 beat. I did not see that coming as far as what they did with their receivers and the tight end. You know, like you said, the tight end game they got going on is
3-headed monster. It's unreal.
That is almost like, it's really. In college football, that's hard to defend. Impressive. They're without a doubt my best team. Like, right now, I'm not even going to call them number 1 or whatever. I just think they're the most ready team. Them and Alabama were pretty impressive. So on the other side of that, just take a quick second. That's still a bad loss for Oregon. I don't want to hear like, well, Georgia's great. That's fine, but you can't bring in a new coach and bring in a transfer quarterback. And then start, Bo Nix, and then get absolutely just manhandled like that. Like, you just can't. That's a bad look. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. You're in the Pac-12 to where you got to fight through the season anyway, and now you gotta overcome that. When it gets to if it would get to the end of the year, it's going to be really hard for Oregon to get past that eye test that we saw. So that they were one of my losers for the week. What's another one of your winners for the week? What's a team you had a great win?
Arkansas. Like, because I watched that game from pretty much beginning to end. What happened was I missed pretty much all the Georgia-Oregon game. I wanted to start watching that Cincinnati-Arkansas game just because I felt like I was going to be tuned in to Georgia for the rest of the time.
Sure.
By the time I went to the Georgia game, it was 14-0, and they were about to score again. So I'm like, okay, I can fully focus on this game. I think that was a good win, right? Like, we didn't know what Cincinnati was going to be. They're a good team. Like, Cincinnati is a good team. Yeah. I was a little surprised just because I didn't know who all they really had, because I know who they lost, and they lost pretty much playmakers everywhere. But when I watch Arkansas, like that was a game that if they give up, they get disrespect. Like they're counted out for the rest of the year. So now it boosts up having to play Arkansas later for Bama or A&M or whoever has to play Arkansas, whoever's on their schedule. But they needed that win. Like I think to be respected, they got the respect of being ranked preseason, but just to validate that, they needed that win and they got it done. And KJ Jefferson, there is so many great like quarterbacks that I just like watching. Like it's not about Heisman winners. It's not about what you go do in the NFL. Like just enjoying the sport of college football. There's a lot of great quarterbacks that are just exciting to watch. Like we'll talk about it later, but one of the games this week to watch, like there's 2 exciting college football quarterbacks that are going to be playing in that game. So watching KJ Jefferson, like people say it's disrespectful to compare him to Cam Newton, but he's Cam Newton-like. Cam Newton-esque, not the next Cam Newton. And it's like the way he can move, the size that he is, the strong arm, like, yeah, it's everything that Cam Newton was, just maybe not to the level of it. Cam Newton took a bad team and won him a national championship. But like when you just watch him, like that's a guy who maybe could even find his way in the NFL here, that get an opportunity, be a backup, get cut by somebody, have a spot somewhere else. Like he could just be one of those guys who he's not a journeyman because he doesn't really play, but he finds himself on a roster. Like when I watch him, I'm like, he can be on an NFL roster, even if he's your backup for the rest of his career. If Josh Dobbs can be still on an NFL roster, then so could KJ Jefferson when it's his time. So watching him is always, if I get an opportunity, there's certain guys where throughout college football where I'm like, if Ohio State's not playing, I want the opportunity to watch some of these guys. And even there's a couple of those this week.
Yeah, I had Arkansas on my short list too. So I'll go the other side, but I'll give you one of my losers. And it's not a big deal, but Cincinnati. And it's not because how they lost. It's not because they got embarrassed or anything like that. It's because, they came off a season to where, right, wrong, or indifferent, they had to fight for their ranking all season. They had to justify everything they did. And of course, they get boat raced in the playoffs. And whoever, people like me who doubted them all season, it was a see told you thing. So immediately off the bat, what do they get? First game the next year, they get a shot at an average SEC team. And so I think like, if you want to overcome the stigma of like, you don't belong, that was a good opportunity. If they beat Arkansas, who people gave a lot of credit to, that would have been a great win. So they lose. So now they're going to go to their regular schedule, and nobody's, I'm not saying they're not going to be good, but they just lost the wow factor. People just aren't going to pay as much attention. They're going to get dismissed. So I thought it was a bad loss appearance wise for Cincinnati in a game that it could have went the opposite. I mean, I don't care if you're Cincinnati, you knock off any SEC school, you're going to get credit for it. And they couldn't. So it's not the end of the world, but I think it kind of puts them on the back burner. So, I'll take the other side of that game for one of my losses. I'll give you one of my winners. Our president, Chris LeBron, brought this up in a good week for Florida schools. And I know you don't want to talk about it because I know you dislike it. Florida Gators had a good Saturday. Gators had a good Saturday. Florida State had a good Saturday. Miami took care of business, but Florida schools
did what they were supposed to do.
But I thought that was a big win by Florida because, again, Utah's a quality team. I don't know where they're going to end up, but they weren't like way overranked, and Florida beat them. I know it came down to the last play, but you're talking about new coach coming in, moving on to a different quarterback. Richardson you just talked about quarterbacks that are fun to watch. I mean, this guy's as fun as anybody in the country to watch play a football game. You said it best. I don't care who they're playing or whatever. I'll tune in. Like I'm in. So Florida had and they're in the SEC. So now, like, you keep winning the SEC, you're going to move up quick. I think already in the AP 25, they went from unranked to, did they jump to like 12?
Yeah, they're 12.
Yeah. And I think if you re-rank, it's fair to do, like, based on they beat Utah. And they're in, so they've got the opportunity now. They put themselves in the opportunity. I don't know what's going to happen down the road. They got one of the games I'm watching this weekend, obviously, is Florida, Kentucky. But, but a good week. Florida State knocks off LSU on a crazy game. I thought, one of my bads is LSU. You can't lose a game that way in your first game. You got a coach that nobody likes. You're fighting to get your reputation back. That you weren't a fluke a couple years ago, and then you come out and and lay an egg like that. So
And you
yeah,
have
good job for Florida.
a
Good.
star wide receiver. Like that
Yeah.
was the biggest news of your game, was that your star wide receiver, projected top 10 pick, was unhappy. He got 4 targets. Now, granted, he did drop
Yeah.
an important pass, but I mean, when you have a receiver like that, like you got to force feed him the ball. Like, especially when you know he's your playmaker. Like, and I think Jaden Daniels, I think he played solid though. Like he was back there running for his life. That offensive line really isn't that good. So it's not an indictment on they don't have a good quarterback. He's one of the guys who throughout the past couple of years I would turn on Pac-12 after dark and watch Arizona to watch Jaden Daniels. So I'm real familiar with watching him, staying up late on a Saturday and watching that game. But and then to lose on a block, and now everybody, what I hate about that is now everybody wants to be like, oh, we should have went for 2. Like if Brian Kelly had went for 2 and didn't play to go to overtime and missed the 2-point conversion,
he might be run out of town already.
Yeah, they would have killed him. Like they would have wanted him fired. He's on the hot seat. He's gone. He played it safe, played it overtime. They just marched it down the field. They just took a lot of momentum out of Florida State by scoring a touchdown. You might have them going into overtime, but you don't go for 2 and give them that win. So I'm not mad.
I'm with you. I don't ever want to see my team do that. I know it works out sometimes, but you just just takes the opportunity off the table. I don't agree with you kick that extra point.
State did it for North Carolina. Like when they did it against North Carolina, they went all in for the win. I'm like, go to overtime. North Carolina ain't stopped you all day. Like, and just real quick, was that not game of the year? Like, do you see a game being better than that North Carolina Appalachian State game? Because I'm calling it game of the year right now.
I'll tell you now. One of my winners was just that game. I know, and again, I'm good friends with a huge Appalachian State fan. I felt terrible for the loss. I know how much that town loves their team, but man, they put on a show. Nothing to be embarrassed about. It was crazy. It was fun. Everybody in the country was glued to the TV for the last 2 hours of that game. It was unbelievable. Great for the state of North Carolina. It was just fun. So yeah, I consider that one of my winners of the weekend. That was nuts.
It's tough to see a game, especially the way it ended. Like it's going to be tough to see a game outdo that. Now I get it. There's going to be, I don't know, Georgia plays Florida and maybe that game's 35-31. So the big brands, the ranked teams play. But when you just love football and you sat back and watched, like that game got into the 60s on both sides. And like Appalachian State was up 21-7, get 35 unanswered points scored on them. They're down 42-21. They come back, score the touchdown, have
40 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they go for 2, and then they don't get the 2-point conversion. North Carolina runs the onside kickback.
Why?
Game's got to be over, right? Like at that point, game's got to be over.
Yeah, but you never no offense to the kid that ran it back, because I honestly missed it, because after they missed the 2-point conversion, we were moving on to our next spot, and I'm like, oh, this game's over. I get to the next spot. Keep in mind, 5 minutes later, both teams had scored a touchdown. And I'm like,
it's going for 2. Like my dad had turned the game off after the onside kick, and so I'm watching the game. I'm talking to him on the phone. I'm like, Dad, Appalachian State just scored. He's like, no, there's no way. And I'm like, no, I am dead serious right now. Like they just scored. They're going for 2 to possibly go into overtime. And it's like, you could tell North Carolina planned on running that onside kickback, because usually when they onside kick it, the front line goes back, protects the guy back there who's going to try and get the ball. They all ran forward.
It was like rugby.
They ran forward and attacked.
I'm just going to be honest. There's every chance that North Carolina just didn't know what to do after watching their defense for that fourth quarter.
Yeah,
there's a good chance that it was just
it turned out
probably a mistake,
because they laid. I've never seen it. It's been a while. I can't even think of a time. Somebody could probably remind me, but I've never seen where everybody just gets laid out on an onside kick like that and it gets taken back. Like I've seen a couple onside kicks get returned for touchdowns, but those are like mishaps on a missed tackle after the recovery, or the ball slid and gave a guy an opportunity to have an open field or something when everybody's going for it. But just to like basically plan on, maybe it wasn't the plan, but for everybody to lay each other out.
There's the stat of the day from Chris LeBron. That was a higher scoring game than when they played basketball last year.
But it was like, that's a basketball score. Like in the now I know it's not modern day. Like today, we're seeing 80s, 90s but still, like if I told you, hey, this team won, 65-63.
Oh, that's basketball.
Basketball? Like, oh, there was a scrimmage? Like, no, that was a football game. Like that was
but you know, Appalachian State's a quality team. North Carolina's not. We might talk. I'm going to give the ACC a couple minutes here in a second, but a fun game. Another comment from Travis Mitchell. He's down in LSU country now. He's from here, but he's down in LSU country. How does Florida State, you know, basically screw up that game? They did have it in hand, and Florida State almost blew the game too. So both coaching staffs, but you'd rather almost blow it and win. So what's another winner you got, Mo?
It's weird, but I say USC.
They were on my list
because Pac-12, the two Pac-12 teams ahead of them lost.
Yep.
And then on top of that, like they handle business. Like you're trying to see what the Lincoln Riley era is. They had 3 pick sixes. I get it. They play Rice. They don't get full respect, but it's like those type of games you don't get respect, but you get disrespected if you don't win 66-14.
That's exactly right.
So that's how I look at, like, even with Bama, like, okay, I don't care that Bama won 55-0, but at the end of the day, like they won 55-0. If they had won 31-14, we're like, they struggled against Utah State. Yep. You got to go out there and handle business, and that's what a team like USC did. And I know Stanford's not a great team, but they get to kind of get their first test. It's a Saturday night game at Stanford. We know no matter what years it's been, even in their premier years, like that's a game that Stanford gets up for and could upset USC.
Isn't that who ruined USC's? Was it? Let me get this right. 03. I think it was.
It was Stanford.
Stanford that ruined it, right?
USC. You remember when USC played Penn State in the Rose Bowl, like 3-4 years ago, when Penn State won the Big Ten, and USC was able to sneak in there, but Stanford had ruined the fact of them being a one-loss team. Remember, they were a 2-loss team, and then they lost the third game in the Pac-12 championship, but because they were ranked higher, they got to play in the Rose Bowl, or they didn't make it to the Pac-12 championship. Washington beat somebody, and because they got ranked higher than this season, they were the ones that got to go to the Rose Bowl, but Stanford was the one that gave them their second loss and kind of made it like, oh, man, USC season's over. Like, we thought they could be a one-loss team, win the Pac-12, the brand is back, they'll make the playoffs, you know, because nobody, like, so that year I think Washington made it that year too and got stomped by Alabama. But that was when we thought.
I don't want to talk about that year.
No, but that was when we thought like USC might be back. Like, you know, things were looking on the upside. So that's
my thing with you
too. That's what it's a trap game early on, but it's also a test where if USC blows out Stanford, they're only 9-point favorites. So if they're going to blow out Stanford, like, okay, this team for real, we'll see what they do in the big matchups. But when you survive a trap game and handle business, which is something I'll probably be looking at for USC. But I mean, to come out there and steamroll and Caleb Williams play almost perfect. Their defense played amazing. Like they did what they were supposed to do in the debut game of Lincoln Riley era. And some of the new head coaches didn't do that. Yep. So you got to give them credit when credit's due. It's not like they let Rice put up 50 points and had a heck of a game. Like, no, USC went out there and handled business. They're ranked number 10. They're going to play a quality game this week. And
they put themselves into the exact position they want to be in, and they jumped the two teams in their conference ranked ahead of them week one. And I'll throw Utah in, the same thing I said about Oregon. That's a tough loss. It's not going to be held against them as hard, except for Florida's not going to have as good a season as Georgia, so they may weigh that in the end. But the fact of the matter is, I said it in my rankings, the teams need these launching pad games, and Utah dropped the ball on that. They could have, if they beat Florida, they really, just because it's, you know how it is, man. It's the name, it's the conference. Utah really would have put themselves in great position. They had to have that. Their path to the playoff now is, I know it's crazy to talk already, but it's just so much more difficult, especially knowing that, USC is coming and stuff like that. So kind of a bad week for Utah, especially the way they lost it on an interception, and when they could have won the game. So that's really all I had for you. Got any more winners or losers you want to talk about?
No, I mean, no, not really. I mean, the winners are pretty obvious for the most part, and then the losers is, like you said, LSU, Utah, the Pac-12,
the Pac-12, the big brands that LSU. They were the only SEC team to lose, I believe.
Yeah, they were. The SEC went 7?
SEC had a good week, and I will say this about the SEC: it wasn't all just on paper. Like they had some quality victories. That Utah is a quality victory. The Cincinnati is a quality victory. Oregon is a quality victory. So the conference. I tell you who won. I mean, Georgia, Alabama won again. Like they're in position. Like they just got to win out and they're in the playoffs.
Yeah,
And rightfully so. They look great right now.
and one of them are allowed to lose to each other too.
It absolutely does not matter. You're 100%. And you know what? I'm not even sure I argue with it at this point. It's early and we're having
Yeah, if they're
overreaction.
both undefeated in the SEC championship game and they lose a close game like they did last year, they're both.
They may shake hands and forfeit that game. I don't even know why you play it. Just I said that last year, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
So another quick question, then we'll move on to week 2 real quick. What was your overall? What did you learn from the weekend? Like, what was your just overall takeaway?
Outside of the fact college football fans don't think logically again for the 20th something year of my life. No, but I mean, what I learned is it's still the same teams that are dominating. It's still, I think going into week 2, my week 1 questions, I still think I have for most teams. I think some questions were raised with Utah or whatever, but I think still like with Clemson and their quarterback situation, like I still have some questions. I'm not on the bench DJ train, but I'm still on the, like, he has to look better than what he looked like against Georgia Tech. He had a bad first half. Numbers wise, he didn't, but if you watch the game, you understand what I'm saying.
Tough first half.
Yeah. And then, but he looked great, or not great, but he looked good enough in the second half, but good isn't good enough. And then like, even just watching that game real quick, I don't think Klubnik should have went in there and threw a single pass. I kind of blame Dabo for that because he looked really efficient and looked really well in the one drive that he had. And boom, there goes the questions right there. We just had to watch a half of DJ struggle. We only put 14 points, and you put him in there and let him run a whole drive. I did have
why plant that seed?
You planted that seed and had to address it and felt like you didn't need to address it. You did it.
I'll be honest, I didn't catch that until you guys brought it up in the chat room, and then it hit me that you were right. I watched it. I'm like, oh man, a kid looks good, whatever. Because I watch Clemson kind of sideways. Like I don't hate them because I respect what they've done, but I also don't care. But I kind of watch them. They might be the one really good team that I watch completely. Not very emotional. So I was watching it. I'm like, okay, defense looks really good, especially for an ACC defense.
Yeah.
They're fast, they're strong. And I said the same things about DJ. And then the kid, I'm like, all right, okay, they've got a backup, they got a choice. And then I saw you guys talk about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, now Dabo puts himself in a pinch. You know, he's and this is what I said, just toot my own horn. I said, Dabo's the one guy that's against the transfers. He's against all this, what's happening, the current state of college football. So now you've got a quarterback that stayed there, and you pride yourself on your players staying, and then you undercut him. I'm like, now you've got a problem. Like now you can't practice what you preach. So I didn't pick up on that.
They should have been like, that was even like just my biggest takeaway is the way he talks about it. Like that stood out to me as like, and you put this kid out there to show his talent instead of like, y'all should have just been running the ball, punting. They weren't coming back. Like run the clock out like everybody else would have did. Like, you ever notice like Ohio State doesn't, when our backups come in, we don't put their talent on display. Not that there's who's the starting quarterback, but we'll go through 3 quarterbacks and just we put the running back talent on display. We might let them throw a pass or two, but Jack Miller, when he had came in last year, when he was coming in a couple times, and Kyle McCord, like we weren't putting their talent on display except the one time when Kyle McCord started the game. But outside of that, like we just run the ball and get the game over with by the time they come in. So we don't even raise those kind of questions. I feel like Dabo shouldn't have done that. Like
you're right. And most don't. Saban doesn't do it. And again, this is what I like about it. I don't care that Dabo did it just because I'm not emotionally involved. But I think I agree with you that it might be the wrong decision. I know the other side, people are going to say, hey, if DJ can't handle it, so what? But I think we're just,
don't deserve that.
It's a fragile situation anyway, and you don't want to lose that. So we'll see how it plays out. They don't have a super tough schedule. They got some big games, and we're going to and my games to watch coming up. We're going to talk about one of those teams. So my biggest takeaway was I kept thinking. I was like, what I noticed was, and I know this sounds stupid, but I really noticed that like coaching staffs matter. Like you look at Florida, man, they look like a better team already. You know what I mean? Like just kind of more with it. You've seen the difference in Ohio State. Like they were settled down. They look like a complete coach team now. Of course, Georgia is, I don't know, they might be the best coach team in the country. Their players are so technically sound. Them and Alabama, it's like, oh my gosh, like everything they do is perfect, especially Georgia's defense. My goodness. So that was just kind of my takeaway is like, man, if you get the coaching right, and then you get good players, like you're a good team. Like you're just
Oklahoma State turning around from being a defensive powerhouse to a typical Big 12 team in a matter of losing the defensive coordinator.
USC better off. USC already better.
Yeah, expectations have risen in USC because Lincoln Riley already, but you got to see the talent perform on the field. And now, okay, USC is a team that they're bringing their brand back. It's going to take this year to do that in some of those big games that they have, but they started on the right track. And like I said, I mean, Oklahoma State went from the best defense in the country to literally a typical.
And Oklahoma looked good.
We're used to.
Oklahoma looked good with Venables as a coach. So it's like, that was just my thing, is like, man, if you get it right on coaching staffs and combination of players, like, you got a chance. You got a chance. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Another one, like Chris LeBron, University of Miami. Honestly, it was a better coach team. So now you put yourself like, okay, now we have a chance. Now we can just work on the X's and O's, and we're not always worried about like mistakes and what are we doing wrong. Like, we know it best with Ohio State last year. That was a mess at defensive coaching, an absolute mess. So, that was just my thing, is like, man, coaching really does matter if you get it right. Mm-hmm. So that was our takeaway. So now we'll talk about week 2 here for a second. Let me do a little graphic here. Get that off there. So what are the games you're watching this week? It's not a great schedule like it was last week, but I think I kind of need a breather and some sunshine. I think I'm gonna go disc golfing, relax a little bit. Hopefully I do not have to sweat out on a Ohio State game. So I'll start. I'm watching Texas, Alabama intently. Yes, I know Alabama's going to win. I have no doubts about it, but I want to see how Texas reacts to Alabama, because I've seen a lot of good teams play Alabama, including my own, and I know what you can look like up against them. We saw what Oregon did against a great team last week. I want to see how Texas responds to that, and I want to see how they approach a big name game, but not a tough game this year. Like, I always like to see how teams approach that. We saw what Georgia did last week. They did not play it safe. Then we saw what Notre Dame and Ohio State did. They played a completely different game. Not that it's the same level, but so I'm watching that game closely just to see how both teams react and kind of gauge where Texas is. How about you? What you got this coming up this week?
Yeah, and just to note that real quick is like, Alabama's used to playing night games and 3:30 games. It is a 11 o'clock
yeah, it will be, won't it?
For that Alabama-Texas game. It's in Austin, 11 o'clock. So that's going to be a little different. I know it's 12 Eastern. I know it's only an hour, but an 11 o'clock for teams that are used to playing at 3:30 in night games.
Just say it, Mo. Just call it the upset. Are you predicting the upset?
No. I'm just saying that's something. Maybe it gets to them at first. But
that is different
business.
But that's what I mean about watching it. I just
like, you just see how they handle it. It might struggle at first, but I don't think the struggle is like, I think maybe the first drive or two, they don't do what you expect them to do. I think they ultimately handle business, cover the spread, blow Texas out. I don't think Texas is really a good team yet. Yeah. I'm looking forward to, there's 3 games that I'm really looking at, and it's all the ranked matchups.
Go ahead.
That Tennessee Pitt game, we talked about it.
That's my game right there.
I think there's players I like watching play, and Hooker is one of those. Hendon Hooker is definitely one of those guys. Like, I just want to watch him play football if I have an opportunity, and knowing that Ohio State gonna handle business and I get to just genuinely enjoy football and not really care about it. No result really affects me on Saturday. Essentially, like, maybe if Alabama were to get upset for some weird reason, then okay, there's a different conversation, but it still doesn't completely affect me because Ohio State still has to handle business. This isn't a conference opponent. I don't see nobody in our conference losing their game that matters, at least for the rest of the season anyway. So I want to watch that one just because, like, I want to watch Hendon Hooker. I think that Tennessee offense is exciting. I think that game.
I like Tennessee's offense, and I love Pittsburgh's defense. I want to see that Pittsburgh front 7 is vicious.
Yeah, and they gave up 31 against West Virginia too, and they offense played like that. Came down. That was a crazy game down to the wire.
Great game.
I can see a 38-31 Tennessee versus Pitt, and that's just a quality football game.
And when I think about this game, to pinball off of that, is I think this is a game that you got 2 teams, both of them are trying to like take that next step to be in the conversation. So whoever wins this game is really in great shape going forward. They're basically the same team. They're right there on the cusp of being good. They don't beat the great team. Pitt had a better year last year. That's disrespectful, but they don't always beat the best teams in their conference. This is the step that one of them can take towards like we're in that next tier of teams. It just looks different when you're 2-0 and rather than 1-1. It just looks different. So
Yeah,
I
100%.
that's my favorite game of the weekend. What else you got?
Kentucky, Florida. I mean, another two SEC ranked teams. Kentucky was really considered the second best team in the SEC East prior to Florida handling business in Utah. Florida got a lot of respect for that win, rightfully so. But to me, sometimes I can't take like my NFL draft cap off. Like, you're watching two NFL quarterbacks play football against each other on a Saturday night. Like, what more can you want? Like, these are top 5 to 7 guys. Like, people are high on Anthony Richardson. People are high on Will Levis. So you're watching two top 5 to 7 quarterbacks entering the draft next year, more than likely play. And then, Kentucky plays gritty football. They have a good defense. Can Florida complete? Like, how are we going to look at? I think the question is, like, how is Florida looked at if they beat Utah and then turn around and beat a ranked Kentucky team?
Oh, they're on the launching pad.
Kentucky being better. I don't even care about the preseason ranking. We thought Kentucky was going to be the second best team in the SEC East. Like, we thought it was Georgia, then Kentucky, then Florida. So if they win that game, like, not only do they have 2 big wins back to back, so what kind of respect do they get there? But then, like, how are you looking at Florida? Like, is that a team that Georgia now has to worry about that you didn't think was? We know Florida could play them good. We know it's a rivalry, but you got
a great way to start the season. I mean, a great way to they'll have basically the best opening record of the season. They'll have two
being 2-0
games under their belt. A huge launching pad for Florida. Yeah, it's a great game.
Florida gets what's crazy though is in that Florida, they're both night games at the Swamp. Like, Florida got, so and it's not to take away from Florida. Like, Ohio State has what? Like, our first 5 games or 6 of our first 7 games are at home. Like, we go to Wisconsin and we play at home again. So, but like, Florida will get the 2 games that matter the most to start their season at home. And if they're able to win, like, we know what it's like at the Swamp anyway, but that turns it into a more hostile environment throughout the season because now Florida feels like they could compete. Because if they win, they're going to be a top 10 team. Like, they're going to be a top 10 team. There's going to be 4 SEC teams guaranteed in the top 10 at that point with A&M, Bama, and Georgia and Florida. So, and now Florida's atmosphere is like, we could compete. We're up there with the best of the best.
Right. They got Tennessee in 2 more weeks. Let's say Tennessee takes care of business versus Pitt. They're going to be playing. They're going to have a shot at a ranked Tennessee team.
They're going to juice the SEC up.
And then they really settle in. But Georgia's not too far down the pipeline. Then they got A&M. Just a tough schedule for the Gators.
Yeah, but that's going to juice the SEC up. If Tennessee and Florida win this week, because I know if Kentucky wins, like, that makes Kentucky looked at high in a higher light, but it's still.
If Tennessee and Florida win, it's.
But if Tennessee and Florida win, and that, for one, that bolsters the SEC, but then 2, like, that Tennessee-Florida matchup might be 2 top 15 teams. One of them.
I'm here for it, though.
Top 10. Like, yeah, I love to see that, but God, you know how much I hate the SEC.
I do know how much you hate it.
4 SEC teams in the top 10 after week 2.
But here's the problem, Mo. Oregon and Utah had their shot to change. Like, they just Pitt's got a shot. Pitt's got a shot to change it. You know what I mean? Like, the teams get their shot. Like, they don't win. I just, there's nothing the SEC can do about it.
Yeah,
Cincinnati. We said that last week. Cincinnati, Oregon, they had their shot. Utah had their shot. None of them can get it done. It just is what it. Texas has a shot this week. Like, if you're Texas, you're supposed to be Texas. Like, give Alabama a run for their money, but they won't. And then we're going to be stuck living in this world. The Big Ten's going to go into their kind of boring schedule for the next 8 weeks before things get crazy with Penn State and Ohio State and all the, heat up. And we're going to be into that heart of, like, every big game for 5 weeks is going to be whatever the best SEC matchup is. And that's just the world we live in.
It's like, I just, with having grew up in Florida and the SEC, but at the same time, though, when you look at it, like, hey, have your fun. These teams got to play each other too. Like, Florida.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, if you look at Florida
and Tennessee, so you're going to have to see all of these teams. None of these teams are
Florida.
Really.
If Florida goes through Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, and A&M, they're going to be the number 1 team.
They're a national title contender. They're probably the favorite if they go through that schedule.
If they go through that schedule,
even 1 loss. Like, if they make it 1 loss, like, I'm probably looking like Florida State's got to be considered. They have a schedule where if they get through it the way you need to, 11-1, undefeated, like, you're a national title contender, and then you're that come out of nowhere national title contender, and that goes to show you that preseason rankings don't matter.
So what's your third game? You had one more.
BYU and Baylor.
Yeah, good call.
Walker's gotten me on this BYU train. They're the favorite playing against number 9 Baylor. It's a late game. It's a late game, and that's something to look at. It's a West Coast game at BYU. Baylor's the number 9 team. It's actually, I mean, I know they're not Pac-12, but it's that Pac-12 after dark hour. In those hours where a game actually matters. So it's like if you catch yourself up late Saturday,
10:15 it starts.
Yeah, so if you're up late Saturday night, like you're not going out, you're chilling, or you've been out all day, and you're like, you know what, I just found myself up late. Like, there's actually a game worth watching that late at night to where you'd be like, you know, I was up till 12 o'clock watching football, and it was absolutely amazing because there's at least one game you want to watch at each time slot all day. So that's kind of what I like. It's not a great slate, but there's at least one game I want to watch.
But it matters because if Baylor wins, then they've cemented themselves in the playoff race, and BYU has to win. Like, they can't lose a game. So it's just like kind of like Cincinnati last year. BYU has to win. So the game matters a lot to both, especially considering Baylor's got to get through like what we have presumed is going to be a good Oklahoma team. We don't know about Oklahoma State now. Like, they don't want to lose a game early, put themselves out of the playoff talk for 7-8 weeks. You don't have to fight their way back. They can beat a good BYU team, and they're locked in for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so that's one of those, like, to know that, I mean, obviously anytime Ohio State plays, there's a game worth watching at that time slot. But even like Alabama, Texas at 12, Tennessee, Pitt at 3:30, Florida and Kentucky at the 7:30 slot, and then at 10:15 at night or whatever.
One of those games is going to be really good. And we're not, we know there's more games and what they're going to be exciting. We're just, these are just like, again, these are from what we're watching, from what we're paying attention to. When we have this conversation next week, we might be talking about 3 games that were our favorite games that we didn't even discuss. And then shout out to Chris LeBron. He's watching Duke Northwestern this weekend. The IQ Bowl is what I like to call it.
That is going to be the worst game of football I ever watched. I don't care what the final score is.
Well, here's the thing. It won't be worse than Iowa last week. That's what we know. Iowa played the worst football game in history.
3 at one point, okay? Like, it was
2 safeties and a field goal to get there. 7.
That was the worst. That's arguably, and that sucks because it's like, it's a Big Ten team and everybody, punt. Yeah, so, that sucked to see. But at the same time, like, I don't care if I was good or not. It doesn't change the stature.
Yeah, the Big Ten really doesn't start picking up steam right away. Their preseason schedules aren't great. Not a lot of unless Penn State goes to Auburn and like blows them out or something. It's really just seeing if Ohio State can stumble, and then things start heating up.
Yeah, the Big Ten season doesn't start until 2 weeks from now when Ohio State plays Wisconsin. Like, that's the first premier matchup in the Big Ten. We're like, okay, the Big Ten season kicks off. Ohio State got a good W against Wisconsin. How does Wisconsin look in that game on how they'll fare against Michigan and Michigan State? So that's when those questions start rising. But that's 2 weeks away because I don't think Michigan has anybody yet. Michigan
doesn't have anybody.
They probably play a week somebody in the Big Ten or something, but they don't have anybody yet. So it's like, it doesn't start until the kickoff of
which is the downside. Like, it's the upside and the downside of preseason rankings. Like, it's fine if you've got that ranking and can hold on to it, but you can't jump up like we're watching Florida do, and we're watching, these other teams maybe can make a surprise. But I know that all works out in the end. But this is a week-to-week podcast. I don't want to be like, hey, we'll see you week 12 and we'll discuss what happened. Like,
we'll talk about it in week 12. Like, it's one of those Ohio State dropped to 3, and there's no chance unless Alabama loses. That's the only game I see. But I don't think they'll lose at all. No. I'm just saying, unless Alabama, like, there's no way.
I no longer think that Georgia or Alabama can lose a game.
I don't think so.
But if they keep their quarterbacks, that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean,
same thing for Ohio State.
No major injury, but I just look at it like we could beat Arkansas State.
Oh yeah,
120-0, and we're still the number 3 team. Like,
that's fair. It's totally fair because it'll work. Like, they'll get their shot down the road to play better games. And, I'm not it'll work itself out because I don't like that because, like you've always said, you prop these teams up and then you get credit for beating them. Then when they look back, it looks like you had a better season than you did. That's why I think that I'm kind of with Stuart Brooking. If anybody wants, go to the Morning Brew with Stu, he released his college football rankings today, kind of with him about realistically ranking teams. So you don't get that false prop up at the end of the year, like,
Yeah.
oh, they beat number 12. Like, well, yeah, but number 12 lost their next 3 games. They don't
Yeah.
always tell you the whole
Yeah.
story. So that's what I got there. So hey, that's it, Mo. It was a great week, great opening weekend of college football. You know, we take a bit of a dip this week, but the storylines start building, everything starts building. It's going to be a fun season. Thanks for joining me, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, 100%, bro. Always down to talk college football with you.
Yeah. So of course, everybody keep up with outtheballnetwork.com, everything we're doing. Keep up with Mo Murphy from Up in Flames. Follow him. What's your handle on Twitter, Mo?
At Mo_cheese15.
Yes, yeah. So I'll put a link in the bio. Follow Mo. He's active on there. Great conversation. And again, like I said in the Buckeye remix earlier, we love you guys. We do this for you. We love the participation. Thanks to Travis. Thanks to Chris. Thanks to my mom for commenting tonight and participating. It makes things so much easier and so much more fun. This was a great time. So hey, enjoy everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Mo.